Okay, welcome everyone to the 60th FMBug. We got some great stuff this evening. As usual, Gary's going to kick us off with the roundup of the massive amount of news, which I think will take about 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah, it's not a lot. It's not a lot.
After which, when he arrives, you're no doubt looking at me in this lonely conference room at the moment. I've got one other person attending physically tonight. So when he arrives, James is going to demo live. Man is so confident he's not even prepared yet. The installation of Server 19 on Ubuntu. Let's hope that goes well. Sure it will. Nothing ever happens with a live demo, does it? Nothing ever goes
wrong. Not at all. Always easy.
Following that, Heidi Porter and Chris Moyer are kindly going to present a recap of the Defcon Cybersecurity Conference, which I think will be extremely interesting. And we're going to have a little bit of space for comments after that and discussion. And anything that goes on too long, we could take into the virtual bar afterwards. After that, Gary's going to lead us on a discussion about the recent Claris Engage and Claris Engage. What was it? Further? I think it is
Beyond.
Beyond. That's what it is. Yeah, like Star Trek. Claris Engage. That's where it comes from. So that's going to be a free discussion for everyone, and if it gets to too personal a point, we'll turn off the recording, I'm sure, or just hold those comments for the virtual bar afterwards, which we don't record.
Please let me know if you don't see this window, but you should do. All good. Fingers crossed.
All good.
Excellent. Right. So, once again, 2 months on, another bundle of news that I've uncovered and researched. Have to say thanks to a couple of blog sites, FM Soup, FileMaker Love, and Penny, who spends an awful lot of time looking and reading up that information and finding information. So some of this has come directly from those sites, and obviously Penny curates a lot of this stuff and passes it over to me to present as well. So thank you to those 2 sites and Penny. A couple of things I wanted to kick off with is Claris Engage, right? So I did this last time we did the news because they announced the fact that they were doing Engage. Those of you that don't know, DevCon is now not a thing that happens over 2 or 3 days. It now happens over 6 months. So that's fine. So they pitched the idea as they were going to release that. So and as I did in the last presentation, I did set fire to it because I didn't agree with it. Because I think it blows my mind that you can run an event over that period of time and have, bearing in mind the title of it says Engage. I don't know how you engage piecemeal for 2 hours here, 2 hours there, 2 hours there. It's not really engaged, but it's what it is. That's fine. It's what we have. So they went over that. I will be covering this lot quite in the later session. There are more detailed analysis of what they discussed, what they were planning and so forth. So I'm not going to dwell on it too much now, but we will get to that later on. A couple of other things in the news that I found is this came out just after we did our session where Wim did some analysis on server performance for us, which was brilliant to have him. But I know I saw Vince posted this. It's a really good post, and it gives you an idea. He's voted it as the Apple M1 is outstanding for its performance, and I think by and large it is. But I do think I do agree with what Wim was saying. I take it with a pinch of salt. It depends on the platform you're running on, what you're doing, and so forth. But it's a really good article. The links will get posted, so don't worry about writing the links down. The links will get posted on the website, so we'll have all the chat and everything on there anyhow. So you'll get those links sent over. So, but it's a good article. Found this. It came out just before our last session, but I didn't spot it. I didn't see it in time. But it's a good read. So I went over that. We're running M1s on test internally at the moment and seeing it from we have a bot system. So we're pushing and throttling that and seeing what we can do to push for it. At the moment, it works fine. I have a question for basically the virtual bar. So if people could stick around, anyone knows about ODPC connections, I welcome you to stay because I need some help. So, so I will be asking the question based on M1's ODBC, an issue I have, and I've spent weeks trying to fix this and I still can't. So, so I'll welcome anyone that knows about those sort of connections. It'll be useful. The other thing as well, sorry for the bad graphics on this because it's a really small, this is actually on Claris's support page. Someone posted a point of Wan Performance, which has gone, it's a massive topic of conversation at the moment because everyone's got remote workers. You're all building solutions that you probably built in an office, not expecting to have the entire office go remote. People are coming back to the office. We're slowly returning to the office to a certain degree on a much smaller capacity, but this is something I think we all need to consider. It's a little monitoring tool. We tested it. It does the same thing as my own internal test that I did, which is my own processes, but it gives you the option of quitting and clearing the cache. And I've said this before, if you're running 19, there's a switch you can do within the documents and you can create a file and then you can have it auto clear the cache every time. Wan Performance is supposed to use this cache. I found the cache corrupts quite regularly and causes issues. But again, another useful post, and it's got this little tool on it that you can then download and really test your scenario of like if you're simulating running over a WAN connection. So definitely worth a look if you've got any solutions out there that are people are using not on a LAN and they're remote, certainly if they're over 4G or 5G. This goes on something else, which is covered in Claris Engage, because they did mention information about growing new developers. It was at the end of the Q&A session, and it was certainly something a part of the main Engage session. Again, FM Super's got basically a feed running on this, and there is a lot of discussion on this. I think it'd be interesting for all of you. You're all developers. You're all here for a reason. You all know the platform, so it's a really good discussion. But there's something I came out of that I'm happy to dwell on a little bit here is they were comparing and saying, well, they've got a way of growing developers and getting FileMaker out there. And I did my own little analysis. We, as you all know, we recruit developers, we train developers in-house. We've been struggling over a period of time to do this. And as a consequence, I thought, well, I'll just go do the research that we do. We use a site called IT Job Watch. Lee, is everyone getting IT jitter? Because if everyone's getting IT jitter, I want to know about it because I'm recording it. So
I've got nothing here. All
good. Lee, I would quit Chrome, go back in and rejoin the meeting. It might fix it, mate. So that's fine. So from the point of them growing the development sort of platform is they want to get a really big cross-section of developers, and they talk about how they're going to do this and then how they're supporting it. And I wanted to say, well, okay, it's great they're focusing on this. I think it's a good thing for everybody. I think it's a great thing that people can, we are going to get more developers coming into the community. That would be great for me because I want to hire more talent that can come through and work with us. But then I thought, well, I'll put it in relative scales of where other things sit. So I thought we use a company called IT Job Watch to monitor IT jobs available. Now, I don't know if it's just UK based or whether it's global you can do. So I looked at Marketplace. So Postgres is one I looked at, and SQL developers. Now, there's something I want to highlight here. The third row down says the permanent jobs citing Postgres SQL. Now, in the last 6 months, what this Job Watch does is it monitors the amount of posts in the UK that have been advertised recruiting, so companies recruiting developers. As you can see there, you've got 4,578 developers as being recruited in the industry over a 6 month period. And then for SQL, we've got 1,004. So not much of a poll, but hazard a guess how many are FileMaker? And if you don't know,
4.
Nearly, John, 14. 14 posts in the last 6 months were advertising FileMaker in the UK in their job descriptions and their job specifications. Now, this is what concerns me. So this massively concerns me because it's the fact that, well, they're talking about education and growing the industry. Well, if the education are going off and doing their computer science degrees and they're doing this, that, and the other, and they're focusing on whatever sector they want, why would they choose FileMaker when there's only 14 vacancies available? And this is my concern. To grow the industry, you need to grow the market first, then grow the developers on it. And that's my concern. All this says that you guys are all amazing and you're getting all the work done and we don't need any more developers. which I wasn't sure which one it was. So it's something I want to highlight. There'll be more talk about this in more detail as part of the Engage, but we'll have this discussion further on. So I'm sure it's a provoke conversation. So with that, I think that is it for me. That was most of the news. Oh, there was the point of Claris FileMaker update. So they updated 19.3. Now there's different versions of this. There's the server version, the pro versions. These are the key things it fixed. We've upgraded. We've seen no differences in whether it's caused any performance issues or anything. I think the important one is that if you use PDS in interactive mode, they fixed that in Pro. That was a huge muck-up. And the M1 support with the Apple, well, I say M1 because M2's not come out yet, but Apple Silicon. We had this on one of our machines where it just kept, every time you opened it, displayed an error. And you just, every time you opened the database, you got an error and then it went away. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. So apparently they fixed it. I've not seen that fix yet, to be honest. So we're still getting the error occasionally, but I'm not sure that we've fully upgraded to 19.3.2 yet. So, and that is, so I think the discussions will be all of that. So it'll be Claris Engage, Claris Engage, Claris Engage, and Claris Engage, basically, I would imagine. So I'd imagine that's going to be most of the discussion. And there will be obviously more discussions as well. So I can see James was running at the last minute. So if he's got his breath, I think I've ambled long enough just to get you in, mate. So it's over to you, James. So that was the news. So, all right.
Marvellous, thank you. Whew, sorry, everybody. I miscalculated how long it took to get from London to Hove. But here I am in the actual meeting. Yeah. Hello, everybody. James from Storganize here. So I'm going to take you through a brief installation using Ubuntu as a server. I am not a Linux geek. I don't understand Linux. I've learned as much Linux as I can in order to set up a Linux server to put FileMaker onto it. I did that with CentOS, and now I've adapted it a bit to make it friendly to Ubuntu. Apologies if any of my terminology is completely wrong, and also apologies if I pronounce Ubuntu incorrectly. I don't know. I used to call Linux. Apparently it's Linux. I don't know. Whatever it is. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It works. That's the important thing. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to show you a command prompt, which is this one here. I'm using a Mac, so I use terminal. If you're using Windows, then you use command prompt. God knows what you use if you're using Linux. I suppose you use this. Okay, so the first thing you have to do is set up a server. We do that using a lovely local company called Gecko IT. You can also use AWS and just buy a server for as long as you want to use it. We find using a local server is good because we can keep everything there, and then we can use AWS as an offsite backup every night. But it's up to you. So when you get your server set up, you will be sent three things. You'll be sent an IP address, you'll be sent a username, and you'll be sent a password. When you have them, you can then SSH into your server using terminal, which we've got here. I like to, excuse me, set up DNS for that so that I'm not using an IP address, so that I'm using an actual text URL to log into my server. I've done that already using Route 53, which is AWS's DNS server. It's very cheap. It's very, very easy to deal with, and I'm basing my Ubuntu installation around having set that up in Route 53. Other ways of doing this are available. Right. So first thing to do is to SSH into your new server. SSH is just a method of getting into it so that you can control it from outside. So we're controlling it through my Mac. My username I've been provided by the server company is sysadmin, and the DNS address for the server is that FMBug storganizehost.co.uk. So we press OK. It asks us for a password, which you type in, and then it gives you a whole load of information about your server, which I don't know. I don't think it's terribly important. It might be, but I haven't found any need to actually read any of that. I now enter a command called sudo bash. What this does is it turns us from a sysadmin into a root user. being root user is very useful when you're doing an installation, because it stops the computer asking you if you're okay for doing that and elevating privileges and the like. So we do sudo bash, and we write the password again, and there we are. We're now root at fmbug_demo. So root is the main big user who can do everything. So we need to know. Now, if you've done an installation already using CentOS, you'll be used to using an installation system called Yum. You use Yum to download all of the bits. It's exactly the same in Ubuntu, except they use a different thing. They use apt rather than Yum. The commands all seem to be the same. So the first thing to do is you do an update to make sure that your server that you've just been given is up to date. It goes away and fills with that. You also have to then upgrade it. Now, I don't quite understand why you need to do an update and then an upgrade, but that's the Linux gods for us. So we do update first, then upgrade. The reason I put in -y at the end is that automatically answers yes to the next question that it asks you. So it would normally say, are you sure you want to install this, or whatever it is. So yes, I am sure. Just get it over and done with as quickly as we can. Now, there are some packages that you need to install FileMaker Server. If you look on FileMaker's website, then they will tell you you need wget and you need unzip. I also installed two others called Nano, which is a text editor, and Firewall D, which is a firewall. So you can install all of them together. So you just do one command, you do apt, which is the thing we use, install -y to say yes, do it, and then the name of all the packages you want to install. So we've got all them there. It goes away, it downloads them all, and it installs them all for you. It's a pretty quick process. So the next step, once it's finished doing that, is to set up the firewall. Now, this isn't something that Claris are going to tell you about, because why would they? It's not to do with their software. But if you're putting an instance on a server, you want to have some form of protection there. So pretty much the basic, the best, the smallest bit you can get for the quickest result is stick a firewall on it. So we've downloaded Firewall D there. We have to enable that. So we do system control start Firewall D. It starts without any fireworks. And then we just do a little list of everything that it's currently doing for us by doing firewall hyphen command and then 2 hyphens list all. And that will list everything that is currently going on with the firewall. So far, we shouldn't have any ports here, and we should have an SSH service there. That's what we're looking for. As long as that's there, hunky-dory, everything's going to work fine. Right, so that's the firewall and the other bits and bobs done. Now, the next thing to do is to download the installation of FileMaker. So what I tend to do is make a separate download directory. So it's already been made here, so that's why it's giving me a slight error. And then once you've done that, you change the directory to downloads. I'm now in the download directory, and I can list all of the files that are in here to see what we've got. At the same time, I've already downloaded FileMaker Server because it's quite a long download. It takes a few minutes. If you haven't been pre-prepped like me, then the command to do that is wget, and then you get the download link from your normal Claris download that you get your Mac and your PC and your server downloads from. There's an Ubuntu link there. You just right-click it and copy link. That's the link that you want, and it will always give you the most up-to-date one. Okay, so that's update. Oh, sorry, that's the package downloaded. Zip file, so you have to unzip that first. So we do let's copy and paste that in. So unzip and name of the thing you've downloaded, and it'll inflate that into my downloads folder. There we are, and it shows you quite handily all of the stuff that has been inflated. Now, importantly, the .deb file here is the one we're going to be working with next, because that's the actual file that's going to give us all the stuff that we want. First things first, I go back to the root directory by doing cd and then the tilde, and it takes me back to the highest level. Next, we want to install at the root level. You might want to install it somewhere else. I like installing it at a root level. I know where it is then. There might be all sorts of security reasons why you shouldn't do that, and I'm sure there'll be some sort of discussion about that as we go on. But for now, I'm just going for the easiest way possible of doing these things. You'll see that when Claris tells you to do this, it tells you apt install // and then the link to download it. If you don't include that dot and that /, everything's going to go wrong. It'll look like it's installing, but it won't quite install properly. I don't understand what that dot and / does. What I do know is it took me a day to discover that I needed it to be there. Many, many different ways of trying to do it again, changing all manner of preferences and the like. Anyway, we want to agree to that. And we want to do a 0 to install the server. And then we want to do the username. This is just the normal stuff you'd expect to see when you're doing a FileMaker install. I would assume that you've all done plenty of them in your time. I'm just putting in some. But that's all gone in. It'll take a little while for it to install away, but it's pretty rock solid. I haven't had any. As soon as I discovered what the / issue was and started putting that in, it's never failed on me yet. So that'll go do its bits and bobs. Once it's finished, we then go in and we can check the installation. And again, Claris helpfully tell us how to check the installation with 2 other commands. Again, not being a Linux person, I've no idea what they do, why they do it. All I know is what you put in and what you're expected to see. These commands are called PS. While we're waiting for this to load up, I wonder if anybody knows what PS actually means. Maybe not. Maybe you're all as Linux unfriendly as I am. Cool. I'm quite glad about that, actually. I'm not as much of a charlatan as I thought. PS, here you go. Process shows running processes, I believe. Nice. Thank you very much indeed. All right, so let's have a look. So we go PSA, grep, FM. FM, it should show us 5 running processes for FileMaker. Boom, there we are. And the other one is grep Apache. It should show us 4 running processes for Apache. Boom. Again, I don't know why. I don't know what that means. All I know is as long as it's 5 and 4, then it's installed fine. So what we now have, and this is where Claris stop, and rightly so, we now have a running server installation of a FileMaker server running on an Ubuntu box. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen. I'm going to show you a web viewer to show you what that actually looks like. Screen. Share. Okay, so if I now go to FMBug, storeorganizehost.co.uk, and I think we all know it should go to 16,000 to have a look at that. It needs to be HTTPS, otherwise it won't do it. Okay, this is what you get, and that's a bit of a pain in the backside, especially if you're using Chrome, because it won't let you go to see your admin console. I mean, you can log on, you can upload your databases to your server.
You can get past that. You can get past it. You can type this is not secure, can't you?
You can, yeah. There are ways around it, but it looks a bit pony, doesn't it? If you're trying to show people, yes, all right, I know how to get into your server and administer it. Yeah. You don't want to get big errors like that. So the next step is setting up an SSL certificate. Now, again, you can do super duper lovely, go somewhere and buy an SSL certificate. Claris recommend all sorts of very expensive ones. However, you can, of course, also get free SSL certificates. I use Let's Encrypt. They're not necessarily sanctioned, I believe, by Claris, but they work perfectly fine. I use them for my people. So there are couple of ways that you have to go around getting them. Like I said earlier, I use Route 53 as my DNS provider. We're going to use CertBot now, which is an application that will get you a Let's Encrypt certificate. It's all very straightforward. And for this demonstration, I'm going to be using Route 53 as a plugin for it. They've got all manner of plugins, but because Route 53 is what I use, then that's what I understand. So we'll start by going to install Snapd. Snapd is another thing like apt that gets packages for you and installs them and downloads them. For some reason, apt isn't good enough for this particular version of CertBot. Again, there's a day of my life that I lost trying to find that out. But now this will just install. Once that's there, then we enable it, and then we have to put in a syslink. Again, this is used in the background to point to that particular application. Then you have to exit out of the whole thing. You don't actually have to reboot, you just have to log out and then log back in again in order to make all that work. In the real world, when you log back in, you actually have to wait for about a minute, maybe 2 minutes for that to actually embed and get happy. But because I've already done it previously, it'll just go, oh, hang on, and get back in as the root user. So install the core. So we install the core and then we refresh the core just to update it. All this is doing is getting it ready for us to install CertBot, which we use for getting the SSL certificate. And then here we go. Now that's all ready to go. We can install install classic CertBot. Let's see if I copy it correctly. CertBot. So that'll go away. Find CertBot, install it for us. We then install a symlink for that. Again, all this stuff is available to find by much cleverer people than me on the web about why we're doing this, what this all means. All I've found is the nice, simple, straightforward set of instructions as to actually do it and get it all working. So then this next bit is installing the plugin for Route 53. Like I said, this is the bit where you put whatever else, whoever else your DNS provider is, they've all got their own plugins. But I use Route 53, so they do that. Okay, we're 50% of the way there on the SSL certificate. We also have to add in AWS's command line interface. Again, they give us a nice, easy to follow set of instructions about what you've got to do to install the AWS CLI. I'm simply copying and pasting all the stuff that they say in there. Easy to do demo. So we get all the AWS stuff, then we install it. So once it's installed, it was already installed, I was cheating. Then you can run AWS version and it will tell you that there's a Python version or something. There we go. And once you get that, you know AWS is installed, everyone's happy. You can then, I'm happy anyway, configure AWS. At this point, you would have to put in an access key as secret. It's all this stuff. It's all spoken about at length on AWS's website. They tell you how to do this. It is very straightforward. It's just a bit more long-winded when you're doing it for the first time. You have to fill in your default region name, as is always going to be EU West 2 over here, and your output format, which is always going to be JSON. Simple and done. Right, so that is the prep done. Then, in order to get an SSL certificate, you run one command, which is certbot, cert only. You tell it which plugin we're using, and then you tell it what you're going to do. You want to do propagation seconds 30. You want it to wait 30 seconds, because what it's going to do is it's going to query your domain name. It's going to put a little thing on it, query it, and as long as it does that within 30 seconds, then you get an SSL certificate. So then you go, and off it goes. Now, this is also the sort of thing that, put your email address in as well while I was thinking about it. And answer their questions. And then it goes off request a certificate. This is the sort of thing that you have to do every 3 months, but it can be automated. So you can run a cron job every 3 months or every 2.5 months, and it just keeps on renewing it over and over and over again, which is beautiful. I do need to find myself a Linux geek that can write a tiny bit of code for me to make it even more beautiful. But I'm sure that there's going to be plenty of them in the wings waiting to come out and say, yes, please, let me write you some geeky code. All right, so what's happened here? We've successfully received a certificate. It tells us where the certificate is saved. So what we have to do is simply install that into our FileMaker server. If you want to do it automatically, you have to just enable a little bit of user access into some of the files that are going to be automatically accessed. So I'll just do that with these things here. Again, this is all stuff that will be on the cheat sheet on the FMBug store. FMBug store, it's not a store, is it? FMBug merchandise.
Start selling if you like.
And then, so then there's one command that you use to install using FMS admin, which I'm assuming we've all used at some point. FMS admin certificate import, and you tell it 3 different files. You tell it the certificate file, you tell it the key file, and crucially and importantly, you need to give it the intermediate file. And that seems to be the big thing about Let's Encrypt, as opposed to every other SSL certificate, as far as I can tell. And I think that's why Claris don't like it. Because if you don't have that intermediate certificate, it works, but it doesn't work very well. And if you try and do data API calls into it, for instance, it doesn't work and it doesn't give you any error. So John's saying we need them for all certs now. Cool. All right, so that's going in. That'll do its thing, and then it'll tell you it needs to restart the admin server to apply the change, which again you can do from the command line, or you can do it from the admin console. That correctly. So that will reboot, and now while it's doing that, we can go back here. Better wait for it to reboot. That's done. And all things being considered, that should now take us to. I need to reboot the. Sorry, yeah, that was the one other thing I missed. We need to reboot your server as well as the FileMaker server, because it's the server that is causing this not secure error, letting you through to the admin console. So yes, you've got your SSL certificate within FileMaker, allowing a connection of a FileMaker user to the FileMaker server. That will all be tickety-boo. But you, as a developer, want to get onto your admin console, so you're using the SSL certificate that is inherent to the actual domain itself. So let's just see if we are booted. So while I'm waiting for that, oh no, there it is. So this now should show us an admin console. There we are. Straight on. Get rid of all Google's stuff. So when you first do it, it will tell you certificate imported successfully, and you now need to restart it. Because we've already restarted it in the command line, we don't actually need to do this. This is just a sort of a hangover of FileMaker server there. So we've got a live FM server sample there. And if we open up FileMaker and try and do a little connect to it, well then... FM server sample, there we go, on FMBug demo. We double click that and up it comes. There we are, and you can see that I'm connected as a guest. We can also see in the right hand corner there a nice little green tick icon saying that the SSL is happy and running as it should. So that's it. It's simple. It's bitty. There's a lot of Linuxy stuff that I don't understand, but I know it works. And it took a lot of research to get to this point, but it works, and it's not too different to CentOS. So that's it. There's two other things that you can then do. I've installed AWS's CLI there. As part of that installation, you can use that to do an automatic overnight backup. And if you want to have the syntax for that, to get in touch with me, and I can help you through that just as a cron job. I do a cron job overnight as well to do the SSL renewal. Again, I'd like to speak to somebody that knows a little bit about...
Lee Alford.
Lee. Thank you very much. Brilliant. I'll speak to Lee about that. And then the only other thing that we do with our servers is we put on a Zabbix agent so that it can be monitored through Zabbix. Again, one bit of information I need from anybody who knows these things is if there is a Ubuntu template for Zabbix yet, because the CentOS one worked well, but I haven't been able to find one for Ubuntu and FileMaker. But that's it. That's my lot. I shall stop sharing now and let Gary carry on.
Whatever works. James, that was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Nice one, mate. Superb.
Pretty good.
I'm going to have to watch the video back, I'm afraid, mate, because I was too busy trying to admit people, so I missed most of it, but I will watch the video back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like I say, I'll drop this crib sheet on the FMBug website tonight so that we can all have the knowledge of days and weeks and months of my life scratching my head on various posts and forums.
I missed a bit of it, so I don't want to spend too much on it. I'd take it the exactly the same process. This was running Ubuntu on not AWS, running it locally. I was running it. It's exactly the same commands. No difference needed. There's no special thing that AWS or any other hosting's doing. It's just the same as buying a box and doing it yourself.
Exactly. Yes.
So if I stick that in my VM environment, I should spin it up in seconds. It follow the crib sheet. It should work.
You should do. Yes.
I'll tell you how it goes.
I take no responsibility.
Can I add something? If you try to upload files not through the FileMaker client, and you do that through SSH, you then need to change the user and the group for the file and the folder, and all of the files you will upload. Otherwise, the file won't be editable.
Yeah, it's a very good point. That's the same in Windows as well, isn't it? It's a right pain in the backside.
Not on Windows. On Windows, it's fine. It will just work. But if you upload through SSH or it's like on Macs, right? You have to change the group and the username to be FM server and FM admin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On those.
Does that still apply if you upload via FileMaker client and push
No.
it? No. I was just going to say, I thought that dealt with it. So it's only if you're dropping files directly on the server.
Yeah. But if you drop the attachments, you have to make the folders to have the same username and group.
Okay. So James, two things. The dot in your path stands for this current directory.
Okay.
So if you do CD and 2 dots, that means the parent directory.
Okay.
And if you do CD 3 dots, that's the grandparent directory. So that says go up 1 or 2 levels, and then you can. So that's how you can navigate the tree using command line. But that's why you need it for the installer. You need to go. I need to start from this current directory / whatever your path was. That's what it stands for.
That makes beautiful sense. Thank you, John.
The other thing is, Wim has written a great article on the Soliant blog about installing Linux. And a little snippet that he put in there was to use a piece of software called Termius, which is a terminal client, which is very cool because you can store snippets in. It's TERMIUS. There's a Mac client and a Windows client. You can store a bunch of snippets in it, which you can either click to run or click to just paste. So therefore, you can put in your admin and password before you run it. And then I've got it already set up with about 5 CentOS at the moment things, so I can just click on it. The great thing about doing it is that it doesn't. The session doesn't expire. I've had a session on for two weeks now.
Wow.
Whereas if you do it on your local machine, after a while, the session will time out. Whereas using that, it absolutely doesn't. So, but that's on the Soliant blog at the moment. It's a really good article as well, just to add to what you've done.
Yeah, nice. Cool. Thanks.
Heidi and Chris, are you ready?
Yep, we're ready.
Take it away.
All yours, guys.
All right. Well, right now we're sharing our screen, so let's. All right.
It's all good. We can see that. It's good.
Excellent.
All right.
Okay, so Heidi and I are going to be talking about Defcon, which is not to be confused with Devcon, the erstwhile FileMaker conference. Defcon is the largest security conference in the world. It's a hacker conference, basically. The same guy who started Defcon, Dark Tangent, also started up, what's the one that comes right before it?
Black Hat.
Black Hat. I'm drawing a blank. And then he sold Black Hat off to some conference organizers several years ago. But so Black Hat happens in Las Vegas, and then Defcon happens right after. And the distinction between the two is Black Hat is much more corporate and security companies and people selling stuff. And Defcon is like Woodstock or something like that. It's a love fest for geeks and security hackers.
And there's lots of corporate. I've met some Oracle
Yes.
people there and IBM, et cetera.
Yeah, it is the great mingling of people from all stripes at Defcon.
And I think it is the largest cybersecurity conference in the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, Heidi and I first started going to Defcon in 2017. It's in Vegas. It's usually spread over 4 or 5 hotels. This year, they were so last year it was virtual just because of the pandemic. This year, it looked like the pandemic was breaking, so they started talking about opening up, and then things got woolly again. And so this year is the only year that I know of where they ran it in what they called safe mode. So if you were willing to have your temperature taken, prove your vaccination status, wear a mask at all times in the conference, then you were welcome to attend the conference in person. Otherwise, they asked that you attended virtually. So there's tons and tons of talks at Defcon, and typically a high percentage of those talks are not recorded, but because they were in safe mode this year and they knew they had so many virtual attendees, way more talks than in years past have been recorded this year. And so those can be found on YouTube at that link that we have right here, or if you just go up to YouTube and search for Defcon 29, because this was the 29th year, you can easily find them there. But there are dozens of talks, and they're great.
So, like we said, 2017 was the first year we went when DevCon was in Phoenix, and then Sunday to Wednesday, and then DEFCON was in Las Vegas, same side of the coast in the US. And so how it started was, we told people when we were at DevCon, hey, we're going to DEFCON afterwards. And, we basically got incredulous looks like, why would you go there? And you're going to get hacked. And when we got back, we were blown away by the amount of information and the amount of information we thought we should know and didn't know until we were there of, how paranoid we should be. And yeah, it was kind of like crickets chirping after we went. And then this year, it's been totally different. Like, what'd you learn? Can you present a recap? What do you do to protect yourself when you're there? And Conrad Moyer, who's 18 years old, also went. And, his comment was, so my takeaway is that being paranoid is reasonable. And if there's one takeaway from this talk that we would leave you with, that would be that being paranoid is reasonable, given what you see at this conference. And then I added this quote here because, Chris was just talking about Black Hat being more corporate and et cetera. When we went in 2017, there was a lot of government people from all over the world, actually, some Asia countries, Estonia, because they have digital voting. 2017 was the year that DEFCON started the voting machine hacking room. And so it was in the news a lot. And then the other thing that happened, and so it's just about that there's this, seeking of cooperation between government and security researchers and hackers. And so this was a quote I saw But the other thing that happens at DEFCON is they show some different movies, and they were broadcasting them in the hotel, and they have like a movie room usually. And I had never watched this fully, but this is really interesting if you want to watch it sometime. Let me start it. I guess we missed the beginning.
Hacker think tank in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Due to the...
Let me get this guy's picture up here. Sorry.
Panel, if you'll jump.
So does anyone recognize this guy? Chris can tell you about him. He's a movie guy.
His name is Fred Thompson. He was a senator. He died in, I think, 2015. But he was in Hunt for Red October. He was in Law and Order. He has a fairly long and distinguished acting career, and he was also on this government affairs committee that interviewed all these hackers using their hacker handles. So it was a very unusual situation where you have an actor who's a senator talking to hackers, not using their real names in a formal committee hearing. But it was just sort of an interesting aside. But anyway, that's Fred Thompson.
So 1998, 21 years ago, and we just want to play the beginning of it
would come
for you.
We're joined today by the 7 members of the Loft Hacker Think Tank.
I realize this is very U.S.-centric, but...
due to the sensitivity of the work done at the Loft, they'll be using their hacker names of Mudge, Weld, Brian Oblivion, Kingpin, Space Rogue, Tan, and Stefan. Gentlemen, I hope my grandkids don't ask me who my witnesses were today and say Space Rogue. But we do understand your need to do that. We appreciate you being with us. May I ask your name?
I'm Mudge.
You're Mudge. Mudge, would you like to make a statement?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much for having us here. We think this is hopefully a very great step forward, and are thrilled that the government in general is starting to approach the hacker community. We think there's a tremendous asset that the hackers actually bring to the table here in understanding. My handle is Mudge. I and the 6 individuals seated before you, which we'll run down the line. Brian Oblivion. This is John Tan, Kingpin, Weld Pond, Space Rogue, and Stefan von Neumann make up the hacker group known as the Loft. For the past 4 years, the 7 of us has been touted as just about everything from the hacker conglomerate, the hacker think tank, the hangout place for the top U.S. hackers, network security experts, and a consumer watch group. In reality, all we really are is just curious. For well over the past decade, the 7 of us have independently learned and worked in the fields of satellite communications, cryptography, operating system design and implementation, computer and network security, electronics and telecommunications. Throughout our learning process, we've made a few waves with some large companies such as Microsoft, IBM, Novell, and Sun Microsystems.
So it's interesting to hear these some of these companies that aren't around anymore. But yeah, but in this talk, they basically told them they could take down the internet in 30 minutes. That was kind of the famous quote from the talk, right?
They've updated that, so now they think they can take down the internet in 1 hour.
Yeah.
They still think they could bring it all down.
Yeah, just not as quick as they thought. All right, so you want to talk about the badges?
Yeah, so I mean,
see our videos here? Yeah.
So the DEFCON conference is a conference of, geeks, traditional introverts. And so every year they have a badge, and the badge is often a printed circuit board badge. This is a 2-layer badge. And one of the design goals of this badge is to get the attendees to talk to each other. So this is a human badge, which means we're an attendee. And then if you look at the edge of this thing, you'll see connectors all the way around this thing. So here's a USB port here. We have USB-C ports. And there's also buttons on here. You can actually play a game of Simon on it if you connect to somebody. And then the lanyard itself allows you to connect badges together at a distance. So you can do social distancing and connect badges together. But these badges will actually connect at the edge. And so you can connect other human attendees, you can connect speakers or artists or things like that. And, the goal is to get you talking to others and, even talking to the speakers or vendors or what have you.
Share again. Oh, it does leave the video on. Okay.
There we go.
All right.
And so this year was an interesting year in that, the pandemic was still raging, and these poor badge makers who were trying to get all their components and put these things together just had their supply chains go completely out from under them. So they wanted to do something with the keys here where they're actually sandwich keys. They have a little cap on the top of them, so you could put inserts inside of them. They could be letters, they could be, images or what have you. And their supplier just couldn't deliver for them. And so they ended up buying 8 3D printers to manufacture all their keys. And then, they had thousands of these things. I think they were making 10,000 or 30,000 badges. And they had to, enlist everybody they knew to assemble these things. They had to build equipment to punch these keys through the circuit board because it took a considerable amount of pressure. Anyway, it sounded like a nightmare. And so the video watch is kind of like a thriller. It's like, day 64, this happened. And now we had to, come up with a new solution to that. Or our 3D printer broke and we had to buy another one.
And they had like 6 kids and 18 family members helping them do this, and they mailed them all out to virtual participants and things like that.
It's crazy. Anyway, it's a quite a tale of perseverance, and so I'm usually not a huge fan of the making of DEF CON badge video, but this one is particularly gripping.
Yeah. So I went through the entire schedule, which you'll see is very large, and just listed some things you might be surprised that can be hacked. One of them was written up in the Forbes right afterwards about a nefarious payload on an ebook that allowed the hacker to then access the Amazon account. So that was interesting. And then shopping carts, air tags, vacuums, probably your lawnmower, though that couldn't do too much damage if it was one of those robot lawnmowers. And then, I was very concerned because I like my food. This John Deere ag supply chain, AgSec they call it, hack. So I put a couple links in there.
So one interesting aspect of DEF CON is, way back when, before there were FileMaker user groups, there were typically Mac user groups, and FileMaker was a special interest group part of that. And so, FileMaker was a SIG. And so DEF CON is kind of a similar structure where you have this con of cons, and then each one of these villages is a conference unto itself. They have their own keynote speaker, slate of presenters. They have vendors. They have, different tabled activities. Some, like in the soldering village, you would, fire up a soldering iron and actually make something and things like that. They have ham radio. So a lot of it is hands-on kinds of stuff that you can do there. But, in an ordinary year, this thing would span 5 or 6 hotels and there'd be 50 or 60 villages. A ton of these were virtual only this year, which means that all this content is available on YouTube, which is great for our purposes here because now we can see it, even after the fact.
I put down some terminology here. A lot of it, some of it you might already know, like SOC. They talked about Engage, the Security Operations Center. But in particular, command and control is a common thing talked about in some of these videos, and indicators of compromise, IOC. And then in particular, we'll talk about SIEM, Security Incident and Event Manager. So
ransomware was sort of the elephant in the room at the conference. I don't think, I guess that's malapropism in this case, because everybody was talking about it. Almost every session, whether it had anything to do with ransomware directly or not, it was called up as, and you'd have to worry about ransomware. So it was all over the place. There was an interesting session by a guy who developed a toolkit called Racketeer, which enables you to simulate a ransomware attack. And his position was that despite how prevalent ransomware has come, there are not a lot of toolkits out there for people who have to do incident response and run disaster recovery plans to test themselves against. So if you want a war game, let's suppose we got ransomware, what do we do? How do we do this? You could use something like Racketeer. I think Wim de Kort has found another one that I can't recall the name of, but there's only a handful of these types of tools out there. And so if you want to do your own fire drills, I would highly recommend you take a look at this. The screenshot on the right is a slide from his deck, and he was talking about how ransomware has increased 330% year over year from 2019 to 2020. It's gotten even worse in 2021. And the long and the short of it is that the upside is really high. The downside is pretty minimal. It's kind of hard to catch these people. And now ransomware has become productized. So you can do ransomware as a service. You don't need to have any technical expertise at all. You can go find a ransomware as a service provider on the darknet and agree to deliver a malicious payload. So now anybody who's got a disgruntled employee who wants to stick it to the man can go out there, deliver a ransomware payload, or woman, yes, and get a cut of the ransom that gets paid out. And so, our position is that it's not a matter of if, but when, any of us or our customers are going to get hit by a ransomware attack, and that we need to, as FileMaker developers, we often are responsible for making sure that of the well-being of the FileMaker server. And so we got to make sure there's not malware, antivirus software running on it and things like that. And that backups are stored remotely in case we have a drive failure. And so we've, over the years have taken on more and more of the responsibility of the server environment that FileMaker server runs on. And, it's our position that we need to, up our game in this regard, because there's a lot more serious stuff that can go wrong. So this is a gigantic topic. Heidi and Wim and I are going to be doing.
And Gary's helping out.
And Gary's helping.
Yeah.
Special guest appearance by Gary. And we're going to be doing a session at the Pause on Air in October. And then we'll be doing a redux of that session in FM Disc in November.
Yeah.
And I suppose we could also come back here and do one here if you guys are interested. But this is a gigantic topic, sort of. We'll be ransomwaring a FileMaker server and then picking up the pieces and say, okay, what broke? And so we're doing some research on that, and we'll also be looking at mitigation strategies. But anyway, gigantic topic. We just wanted to sort of touch on it here, but there's a lot more to say on this particular thing. So,
and literally every time we mention this session to someone, we hear about an issue with one that, yes,
oh yeah,
almost every single company in person we talk to 99%, yes.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. And yeah. So one of the things that I don't think we mentioned yet was that, when we hear about these situations, usually they are Windows machines, FileMaker server on Windows. And so when I was looking through the topics to see what would be interesting to the FileMaker community, I saw this Windows event log analysis topic and thought, well, maybe not, that'd be useful. And we watched it, and we took probably, 10, 20 screenshots
a bunch
on our, which by the way, we were on a cleanly wiped Mac. We don't turn on our own equipment when we're at these conferences. So this guy, Malware Jake, he's an incident responder. We took 4 screenshots. There were a ton though, and we're looking for the link for this because there's a lot of really interesting details, and we just pulled out kind of 4 comprehensive ones. But his 2 big tips were, you need to increase the default log size. He often comes in and it's still the Windows default log size of like 20 megabytes. He said it should be at least half a gig. You need log events for the domain controller. That's what we understand has been compromised in some of the larger hosting company hacks and other hacks. And, no investigator ever said, what am I going to do with these logs? More often than not, you don't have what you need because you haven't enabled it. And so these are a couple slides about some logging to enable in addition to these 2 larger tips he had. And there he is in the corner, Malware Jake.
Yeah, that's Jake Williams.
Yep.
And that's his company, BreachQuest.
Yeah.
So, we only have 4 of these. We thought we had like over 20 shots we took, but each one of these is just like has little shades of gray in it and nuggets of wisdom. It's like, okay, 4624 indicates a login. Well, that's good to know. We might want to keep tracks of login. But, one thing I didn't know was that logins come in flavors. So a type 2 is a keyboard logon, and type 3 is a network logon, and type 10 is a remote. But if you're using VNC, that gets counted as a keyboard logon. And so just subtleties like that, account names ending in $sign or machine accounts, these are just nice little nuggets of information for you to know. And so if you imagine that we sort of take these 4 things that we're about to show you. So this is the first one. If you take a logon and then you aggregate it with a
Oh, you didn't say anything about the integrated lights out either, did you?
No, but
Okay.
it logs the same as a VNC.
Right. That's just a good thing to know. The headless, you know, it looks like it's a keyboard login. So you take that, and then you have this event 4672. Someone comes in and they've been assigned admin rights. You know, that's where they can get in and they can perform lateral movement and escalate privileges. And so you might want to, you know, log those events when someone is given special privileges like this.
And then 4732. So this is where he really advocates for a seam. So if you take a domain account and then you add it to a local security group, you know, they jump from server A to server B. That event is not logged at the domain controller where that account lives, if you will. It's logged locally. And so he says this is, you know, sort of the poster child for why you would want to have a seam. And by a seam,
anyone remember what that stands for?
Security Incident Event Manager.
Yeah.
So you might have heard of a product called Splunk, or Alien Vault has OSIM. Varonis makes these things. I think the first two I mentioned have community versions. So if you just want to sort of kick these around, start playing with them, they're, you know, like a Zabbix, they're a monitoring infrastructure. Yeah. But this idea that you need to aggregate across multiple servers to get a complete picture of what's happening on your network, I think is a great point.
Yeah, and alert when things are happening. So similarly, the next slide is also about alerting. You know, so you have this event 5140. If a share was accessed, any share name with $1 is a hidden share. So you might want to alert if a hidden share is accessed, because that probably could be a nefarious actor. So something important to pay attention to. And so these are just 4 slides. We're still trying to get the video of this. It's not out there yet. Last time we looked, but there is, you know, maybe that would hurt his job security, but there is a lot of really good detailed stuff in this presentation.
Yeah, we pinged him on Twitter, but he hasn't responded with a post yet. So
yeah,
we don't know where this particular session is.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna check with this one.
So UPnP, this is Universal Plug and Play. This was a handy thing when it first came out. You know, you plug your mouse in, the operating system says, oh, that's a Logitech mouse, and loads the drivers for you. Or if you get a gaming console and bring it into your home network, the gaming console can talk to your router and say, hey, I need to open this one or multiple ports to talk to the mothership. And that's all well and good. This was fine when it was used on a LAN that, you know, was composed of mutually trusted devices. It was okay for them to talk to each other. The problem is, about 10 years ago, these things started to be widely used on the WAN, and they were internet facing. And so they were just sitting ducks for botnet operators. So there are literally millions of these compromised devices out there that have been harnessed into, you know, massive botnets. This researcher has been looking at these for a few years. He's sort of struggling to get a beat on exactly what they're doing. He suspects they're being used to manipulate rankings on Amazon, or gaming the Google search algorithm, SEO compromises as well. So things like that. The amazing thing to me, though, is that this thing is still going. It's like one of those underground fires that just burns for years or decades or something like that. So this is an ongoing problem. These botnets are still up there. They're still standing around. And the type of stuff you can do with this is indicated.
And some people are aware of it. And so they have shut a lot down. There's still a lot open out there.
Yeah. So it dropped from like 4 million to 3 million, but there's still a huge problem.
Yeah.
But if you look at the screenshot on the right here, we have a before and after. And so before, port 80 was filtered, so people couldn't just march right up to it. And what they did was they used UPnP to open up a 555 and mirror port 80. So it's basically a reroute for port 80. And I think it has a time to life of like 10 minutes here or something like that. So you stand up 555, and then you open up your web browser and go to port 5555, and all of a sudden you get your login screen. And so you can do whatever you were intending to do, and then the thing just sort of disappears as if it were never there after 10 minutes. And so for all the problems this guy has found, it's only a fraction of the total scale of the thing, because these things are so chimerical. They get stood up for a few minutes or what have you, and then they disappear all by themselves. And so any snapshot is really a limited view of what's actually going on here. But I'd highly recommend that YouTube video.
All right, so this one I looked at after the conference, and I kind of took some notes and left them up here as I was watching it, because it was attacks exploiting OAuth authorization, which probably many FileMaker people have worked with Graph API or other OAuth auth code flows. And so, you know, it used to be history, you would try to get the username and password. Now with OAuth, you try to get the tokens. But he in particular, and I'm going to play this video, he in particular is looking at hacking device code authorization. And one of the things we both wanted to say about this was, you know, to really think about if this was you and you got this phishing email, and remember that phishing emails are the largest source of ransomware attacks. If you got this phishing email, would you fall for it? And if you would fall for it, would any of your clients fall for it? So let's play this one because it will demonstrate. And I have it speeded up a little bit. Oops.
A little bit deeper. So what really happens under the hood is a user is trying to log in or do some task. The device gets some user codes and sends a URL with that user code to the user so that they can authenticate. And once they do, OAuth tokens are created, which are then accessible from the device. So, okay, similar to what I said before. But to show how easy it is to abuse that, or at least how difficult it is as a user to protect your credentials, I'd like to go through the demo now. Just a short note, Dr. Cinema has a great deal of information at his blog, O365 blog. Super great resource. He has his toolset, AAD internals, great stuff about Windows AD, Outlook, Office, as well as OAuth in there. So highly recommend that. So let's jump into demonstration. So to lay the stage here, on the left side will be the browser of the victim, the right side will be the terminal of the attacker, and we'll actually go through a device code flow and sort of see the implications from both sides. So in this case, we're logging into the standard URL for this company that Ed is part of, Feast Health, and we want to gain access first to Outlook. So we punch in name, password, get to two-factor. In this case, it's software-based. We punch in that code. Do you want to stay signed in? No. We'll go through it, and boom, we're in Outlook. Now, meanwhile, the attacker independently is thinking of phishing. Let's start up with a script. So running in demo mode. This is part of the open source software we are releasing concurrently. I want to point out a few things. One of the first steps that we're doing as part of the phishing is actually following the device code authorization flow. We're going to generate a code. If you look at the post, we're specifying a set of APIs, the Graph APIs, as our resource. And we're actually using a client ID. This is the application client ID. When you create an application, you know, the OAuth world, you have to get back a ID and a secret. We're actually reusing one. We didn't have to create an app to carry out this phish. This is the Outlook ID that we're reusing. When we execute this first step, we get back a user code that we're going to phish the user with, along with the login URL. It's called the verification URL. Okay, we'll explain the other fields as we go. Now I'm going to send out the phish, and in a second, phish will appear. I'm going to pause and just say that after the phish is sent out, part of the device code authorization flow is to pull the identity platform, in this case Azure, for OAuth tokens, which will be created after the user logs in. So it will sit there waiting. And in a second, there it is. On the left, we see a new email. Let's check it out. Ed has received an email from the Microsoft Office 365 product team. It is thanking Ed for being such a great customer. And as part of that, he'll get 1 terabyte extra storage and increased file size, attachments file size of 100 megabytes. It's awesome. Ed can't resist, and he types in the code. Now, let me go back and point out in the message, there's a real URL in here. It's Microsoft.com, nothing shady or funny. It's an href link, but it's actually pointing to the text as part of the device code authorization. So we can see that some fish detection might fail right off here on domain alone because of this Microsoft.com. Okay, so let's go back as Ed follows that, punches in the supplied code in the fish, and what's happening? He is being prompted to authenticate. Okay, since he had already logged into Outlook, it is cached in the browser. Otherwise, to type in his username and password and perhaps MFA code, and then get to this stage. I want to point out, here's the prompt. Are you trying to sign into Microsoft Office? That Microsoft Office came from the use of the client ID in our phishing step initially. Okay, we use the client ID and we get the title. All right, so there's continue, and that's it for the user. They entered the code, they authenticated, they're done. Meanwhile, we are polling. The attacker script is polling, checking every 5 seconds. This is all part of the protocol for device code authorization. Now that the user is logged in, we should have OAuth tokens, and this will return in a few seconds with access tokens, session tokens. There it is. So let's note a few things, okay? Number one, what's in the response is scopes associated with the tokens. These are the permissions that we can that we have access to with this token. The resource the tokens apply to is the Graph API. We have an access token. We have a refresh token. Okay, this is great. What can we do in the Graph API? Okay, you can see the indirection here. We put a application, Microsoft Office. That's what the user thinks they've approved. We got access to the Graph API, which is a little bit broader than just Outlook. So one thing.
Yeah, so a lot of access from that fish. And I just kind of put a summary of his, and you can watch this talk. We have the link there and everything, how, for this, he didn't need a server infrastructure. He just used, the Microsoft. He didn't need to register. He showed earlier in the talk, I think, registering a nefarious application, but he didn't need to do that. He just used Outlook. He was able to, I think he moved laterally to other services. He shows a little later. And then the last one is the logging was really limited. So even malware Jake, might not be able to see much of what happens. So that's a little scary. And, we've talked with, other companies are really advising their clients to use something like KnowBe4 and get their, I don't know if everyone knows about KnowBe4. We can talk about it in the Q&A, but it's a training for employees about, phishing, what not to click, pretty much after we came back from Defcon this year, I don't click any links in my email anymore. And so he talked about at the beginning, the usability is the enemy of security, or I think he had it backwards at first, but, it's kind of sad that you can't trust your links in your email anymore. And it is less usable, but it is better to go to the site and log on than click a link in your email these days. So be paranoid. So a few other interesting hacks and sessions, just from looking through. I saw this JSON one, and I thought I'd remembered some people using fast JSON in FileMaker, and so I started looking at this. I was also, of course, interested in that it was stealing the money on the blockchain. But basically, a lot of this talk is about the JSON serialization vulnerability he found. But then he looked to see, what's the biggest ROI I can get from this, and that was with a crypto exchange. And so you had a couple of thoughts about this.
Yeah. To us, there's a larger point to make here, and that is that in general, people who've used FileMaker for a long time have pretty deep expertise in FileMaker. But as these technologies start to accumulate at the edge of FileMaker, I think it's fair to say that most FileMaker developers do not have deep expertise in JSON or JavaScript or things like that. And those
vulnerabilities.
Yeah, those add attack surfaces to FileMaker applications depending on how they're deployed. And so we just think, even though this ostensibly has nothing to do with FileMaker, it has to do with technologies that FileMaker developers are using. And so we think stuff like this is worth paying attention to.
Yeah. And then I just looked at this. I'd seen this in the schedule and looked at some of it last week because, like we said earlier, it seems like, you know, Windows machines are attacked more. But this guy's whole session was on vulnerabilities that he could attack in the Mac. A lot of the session was about on the edge, like Active Directory bound to a Mac or Okta or one login. And then at the end, he talked about, you know, pipelines and Docker and Jenkins and getting, you know, in via that. But I pulled out one thing, and I just listed a couple things he talked about here. One of the interesting things I did listen to in this was he found a vulnerability, okay, and you know, he thought he was going to get a large bounty payment because what happened was he created a nefarious DMG file at the point when Bash and Python were not checked by Gatekeeper. And I think he put both Bash and Python scripts in there and got in and got SSH keys and AWS and GCP and Azure keys. And come to find out that Apple does, you know, even though they give $100,000 bounty for sensitive data, what they consider sensitive data is contacts, mails, messages, notes. It's very narrow. And so his view was, you know, they're looking at it from a consumer perspective. But, you know, you get into enterprises, you know, all these keys, you're probably getting to consumer data. And he felt like it was very consumer versus enterprise focused when, you know, once you have the keys to the kingdom, you probably have some of that other information too. And so he got a very small bounty payment. And, you know, he said at the bottom there, come on, Apple. So that was kind of interesting. And then the one other session I wanted to mention, and again, we have the YouTube link, you can watch everything, is this is the session that everybody was talking about, was the world's first container hack on a mainframe. I didn't put any screenshots or anything because, you know, that's not very mainframe-ish. But it was kind of a fun, I listened to most of it, a fun talk, and they had fun. It was just kind of, you know, standard. I used to work at IBM, and I did work on, I was working on a peer-to-peer networking profile and a protocol back in the late 80s, 90s. And I did work on the mainframe. It was called VTAM then, and they the software system, and they renamed it to ZOS. So you can see how, you know, that sounds a little more modern. But the IBMer guy knew a lot about the mainframe, and then the other person knew a ton about Docker. And so they taught each other and, you know, basically did this world's first container hack on a mainframe. And so this was kind of the talk that everybody at DEF CON was talking about because, it, you know, it was a first. So that was kind of interesting.
And so that's kind of it. You know, here's the YouTube link again at the end. If anybody has any questions, we're happy to take them and share.
Brilliant presentation, guys. Really, really good. So I just won't sleep again. Thanks. That's the only thing I would say. I think this is stuff I've given a talk on security and stuff in this session before, and I think this is something you can't ignore. I think what Heidi and Chris are doing is taking it to the next level, definitely. And you don't know how easy this stuff is to execute. You think it's complicated, you think you got everything locked down, but the reality is you'll soon realize that, hold on, a single exploit, and you're vulnerable. Like a little thing, I don't know whether you know on Windows that it happened recently. Razer, the basically mouse provider, massive hack. The installer asked for the folder of the dialog box of where you'd like to install the installer. And this comes from Razer directly. So you plug any Razer product in, currently on a Windows machine. The end user, so you've got a disgruntled end user, the end user has an option of that dialog box to right click and then send run PowerShell. You think, well, that's fine, I've got security. But the installer has got full access to your machine, domain level access. It has to do the install. So now if you've got a disgruntled user, they can boot PowerShell as full admin with no credentials needed. Right, so none needed. And then they can just fire whatever they wanted in PowerShell as full admin. Because all they wanted is an installer. So that there's real world scenarios of this that you do need to look at this, but I think this is great what you guys are doing. I think it's really opening our eyes to easy ways of getting access to systems, and we need to think about this if we're hosting our solutions. I think it's so key. So,
Yeah, it was funny. So Chris had said, well, maybe we could just write a script to monitor the backup folders for FileMaker and alert if something, that was not backup, came in there. So one Saturday I was like, okay, I'll write a PowerShell script. And then that night I was looking at all the hacks with PowerShell and how the recommendation is to turn off PowerShell. So I'm like,
Don't run it.
Yeah, don't run it. Yeah, don't run it. I mean, there's other, you can write a C# script or something like that. But yeah.
I think you're right. Both of you are right. One of the key things I took away from what you just said, and some people will know this or not, how many of you have put the password in the username field when you've gone into, say, log into your server? And if you have, do you know what that does? And if you don't, in the Windows,
it logs it.
Yeah, in the Windows log, it actually logs your password in the log file.
Oh.
So if you mistype it, the one cleanup thing you need to do is go to your log and purge your logs on your server. If anyone gets access to your logs, they've now got access, like certainly if you're going in as domain admin or admin of the machine and you typed it the wrong way around, as soon as you get in, you should go and purge your logs because you've now just written the password in plain text. So little things like that are the getchas or gotchas, shall we say, that will come back and haunt you because it's just like, well, once I've got access to a log file, that's it, they're in your server. So there's little things of cleanup stuff that you need to do. And that goes for the FileMaker log as well. Just want to mention that. So if you type it in the admin console the wrong way around, it will write in the log file the password as a username to try to authenticate. So even if you do it on one of your solutions hosted on a file, and say you have your admin as the admin user and the password, and you type them the wrong way around, it will write in the FileMaker log, this user tried to authenticate, but it won't be the username, it'll be the password that gets written. But yeah, it's interesting times. That's all I can say. I think we need to keep our eyes open. So great talk, guys. Brilliant. Super.
Heidi, Chris, could you also speak to the, I don't know if I want to say shift, but oftentimes there's a lot of business owners who feel, quote unquote, feel like they're too small to be targeted, like it's their defense on those type of things. But I think in terms of what gets targeted, quote unquote targeted, is not necessarily a specific business or anything. Like people are going after vulnerabilities and they'll exploit them wherever they stand.
Right.
Or anyway, could you just surf a little bit on that?
Well, not that this isn't a world-renowned user group, but we just had a person coming in to
troll the user group.
Troll the user group, right? I mean, I don't know. It's not exactly the same, but yeah. In terms of, you're talking about in terms of getting clients to, invest in like a know before security training, or even we tried to get one of our clients to just have their employees listen to an hour talk about what to be aware of in emails, and they're not doing it yet. I don't know. What do you think about the too small? There's
sort of return on effort, and as we mentioned earlier, now that it's ransomware as a service, all it takes is one annoyed employee who's like, I'm going to show those guys, and just take the doctor's office or whatever it is and turn them over to the ransomware as a service people, and all of a sudden they're on the target radar. So I think,
and they'll make some money. They don't have to just be
they won't make a fortune or anything like that. But even a small outfit has something, and if they're just handed to the ransomware attackers on a plate, then they're going to get hit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I never thought of this before, so I'm just riffing here. People get embezzled all the time, right? I mean, it's surprising. It's really surprising to me. You're like, we hear about our vet around the corner. Someone was embezzling, and it's just shocking that people do that a lot. But you could almost see this as like an easier way to embezzle in some ways, right? For a lot more money, probably, I think. Yeah.
Especially if an insurer is in the picture.
Yeah.
I feel this is a super risky time to be a hosting company right now, because your liability is not just to your own users are, conducting business, but now all of a sudden you have liability for the people who are trying to conduct their business on your platform. And so the insurance company is going to look at that kind of exposure and like, doesn't matter, pay those people, whether or not that's a great idea. But the more ransoms that get paid, the more lucrative the business model becomes and the more it happens. And so it's just a snowball effect. And I think we're in for rough rides ahead in the future.
Because people were saying like, well, who's going to come after me? I'm not AT&T, and there's nothing to get from us. But at the same time, like those larger corps have been gearing up and facing those threats more with more elaborate responses. So I think the attack folks are going to start going after things that require less effort.
I think, Robert, you've nailed it there. I think it's about how complicated it gets. And I think to them, it doesn't, to the attackers, they don't really care. They just want to find a vulnerability as fast as possible, as quickly as possible, and exploit what it can. I wouldn't mind betting most of the attacks, there's thousands of attacks that they get through the door and they go, it's not worth it. That's fine, move on. There was nothing there. But if any business owners there looking at themselves and going, no, we're not big enough, well, think about what the impact would be to your business if you were attacked. And I think that's what you got to look at. It doesn't matter whether you've got a one person operation, whether you're a multinational, it doesn't make a difference. You just got to think about what the impact is. If it happened, how does this detriment my business? If you're a single person running on your own, if you're just a plumber or a carpenter that runs their own business and has their accounts online for some reason, then you imagine that was completely locked off. What damage would that do to you? And I think that's the way you got to look at it. It doesn't matter the size of them. You've just got, I think we have a duty of care to sell it as you're vulnerable, regardless. It doesn't matter your size.
Well, and there's another, for those who are in the consulting business, right, and you get the call or emergency or something like that, so if I think of these ransomware people, right, so say they, are, going about their business, getting into places, locking them up, and they discover there's nothing worthwhile there. Are they going to answer the phone and unlock your file? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, that may seem far-fetched, but really, if they get in the door for a couple places and, it's not worth their while, are they going to be busy on something else, or are they going to, fix this situation with this business who doesn't really have, are they going to be busy just like you are as a consultant, and sometimes you can't answer every phone call? I don't know.
And there's another aspect to this, in that these attacks are often becoming two-pronged, where they try and exfiltrate data. So now all of a sudden they have either your customer data or personally identifying information. Maybe they have national health numbers and stuff like that. And they can say, pay the ransom or else we're going to publicly embarrass you. They did that with Sony several years ago, where they said, hey, we'll leak all your movie scripts and things like that. And so if you are a company that has people's personally identifying information, now all of a sudden you're looking at potential liability for not having adequate privacy controls. So they can really twist your arm if they're able to get data out of your organization.
Is anyone in the US a T-Mobile customer, by the way? Because there was 14 million records all exfiltrated out of T-Mobile last few weeks. So and they basically even got pins, they've got national security numbers, they've got everything. So anything that you wanted to apply for a loan from a personal point of view, they had. So the damage that can be caused by personal data is key. So I think that's the other thing. What do we build? We build databases. 99% of people that build a FileMaker system is for a CRM system to start with. That's where we usually start there. We'll create your database that holds your customer records. As soon as you do that, you need to secure it. So,
yeah.
And it's tough. It's tough to do. It's tough to rewrite these. Anything, you've got legacy, you've got these companies that have already invested in it. They've you built a system for them 6 years ago, and they're like, we're very happy with it. We don't need it redesigned. Yeah, you do. You really do now. So,
yeah, I think there's tons of legacy stuff out there where people are actually storing credit card numbers. Not tokens to credit card numbers, but the actual credit card number. And those people are just sitting on a time bomb.
Yeah, I don't know if you've looked at, wherever you hold your investments and stuff like that. Most of them don't have MFA in the US, even. Just doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
savings account I've got doesn't have two-factor. You're like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So can I ask you a quick question about your view of FileMaker Server as a distinct piece of software? So we talked a lot about people kind of hacking to get into the base machine to then like encrypt whole things. But what's your view on FileMaker Server as a bit of software and its relative vulnerabilities? Not asking you to be specific about anything that you know as a whole, but just kind of, that's the thing that concerns us most because we're all FileMaker people. There are some things over which we have less control, but we do have some control over the FileMaker Server environment.
I think Gary would have a better answer to or a richer answer to this, but one point we'd like to make is that FileMaker Server is kind of unique in that we really only have, unless you're doing something elaborate with web publishing, but in general, you really need to play defense on your backup folder and your database folder. And so if that's the focus of your defensive efforts, that's a lot easier job than it is making sure some obscure corner in other parts of the machine aren't compromised or encrypted or something like that. As long as your databases are in decent shape and you can get those files back up, you're going to be, perhaps not great because you'll have had a system outage, but if you can keep your data intact and not have corruption or data loss issues or lose transactions, as the person with responsibility for the FileMaker system, you're in pretty good shape. So I think the scope of your defensive efforts is kind of narrow, which is helpful.
Yeah, or better yet, if you can know, because they go into the backups first, right? And they're encrypting your backups usually, and then they go after the live system, and you have no backups. From what I understand of the, 10 people we've talked to. So if you can detect them when they get in their backups, you might, avert even a live outage, right?
And the other aspect to this is that, the biggest ransomware targets out there are generally Windows ecosystems. There are some ransomware variants that will go after Linux. There's a couple of older things that have attacked the Mac. I think Keylocker was 5 or 6 years ago.
And ransomware is a good utility. Ransomware, WHERE for the Mac. Yeah.
So I think it's even easier to play defense if you're on a Mac or a Linux box than if you are on a Windows server. So that's sort of another aspect to this. But Gary, I'll bet you have some thoughts on that question.
I think the key thing is it's following the best practice, and it's following what you should do. I don't think that Claris is doing all the work for you to secure FileMaker as an engine. They'll do what they can, and I know, as I said, I think in one of the previous sessions, I know Jordan was trying to get, I think, something he was doing where they were doing some stuff where they had actually fully got a hacker to hack the FileMaker server, and I think it actually passed pretty well as a piece of software. So that's the actual engine. The engine was pretty solid. It's quite a good build. But I think it's that thing of follow those best practices, which is have your backup stored off-site, have your backup stored somewhere else. There's technology in our arsenal now, certainly against ransomware, which is basically object locking your backups, which is a thing that's only just come about recently. I know John knows about this from Wasabi. Wasabi do it, and that makes an extra layer of security. So you write your backups once, and they can't be overwritten. So therefore, if an intruder did get in, they tried to encrypt your backups, they can't. They're not allowed to touch them. So, and that's held at the system level of the backup technology that you're running it on. So I think it is that thing of knowledge is power. I think understand what you're trying to do, and think of all the eventual the pitfalls and the areas of concern for you, and then focus on those areas and address them. And as you say, John, I think FileMaker as an engine is not too bad. I think it's fine. But if you were to back up on a Windows box, which was on the internet, unsecure, and that's where your backups are held, you're going to have a problem. And I know that's stating the obvious, but that's the thing I think we need to be focusing more on. Just think through the process of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and then try and think like someone who wanted to perpetrate you and get into your files. Where would they go? What would they do? Where's my vulnerabilities? Create that list of where you think your vulnerabilities are. Well, if you get to a list, you've got something to fix. If you don't have a list, great. seek advice, talk to people here, talk to other people, look online. I think knowledge and sharing that information is the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. As practice, I now push all backups nightly to Wasabi because, like you say, it has 90-day. You can't overwrite it, but still the vulnerability, because if somebody somehow manages to get hold of your keys, they could in fact go and delete those backups. So you think you're safe, but the backups have got deleted. That, you know, there's levels at which you can never be too paranoid, isn't there?
Oh yeah, I think what you said, I think it's Chris or Heidi, it's about being paranoid. It's not about being paranoid, it's being paranoid enough. Yes. I think you've got to be overly paranoid about everything and think, well, what is this? What is that? What is that? Can you mitigate against all of those? If you can, do it.
But then that is the job of a consultant, isn't it? We are paid to think about all the scenarios that are potential for this customer, and that's everything from the simple things like your users putting bad data in because they're an idiot, to something really serious happening because they clicked on a link and then suddenly you've got ransomware. So, and our job on some level has changed from just how do you do the technical, some coding to make this work, to how can I advise people.
Yeah. One thing I want to reiterate, John, when you said about like the Wasabi stuff, if you've got the object lock on, you can't even delete it.
Yes, that's true. But if you think, oh, I've done this, you know, you've got to go through each of the things. Just thinking, oh, it's okay because I did this, is sometimes not enough. It's the what if this, have I made sure that that's also on? So.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right with that. If they've got into your system and they've got the keys, and they now know the keys to the backup, they can write a key to then overwrite the backups with nothing. Now all of a sudden you've now got no backups.
There's another interesting aspect to this that I think would be uncovered by doing some more gaming, and that is, what if the system that had all your credentials that you needed to get into the cloud was itself encrypted? And all of a sudden your IT systems that sort of know where things are, know what the access is, you know, how widely distributed is that? So if all your IT systems went down, would you still be able to access your cloud-based infrastructure if all of a sudden all that stuff was offline?
It's a valid point. I think more and more of us are using keyloggers and basically tools like LastPass, 1Password, all those sort of things.
Yeah.
Good.
I was in a Slack type thing the other day with somebody from the States about the fact that the encrypt at rest is just done with a password as opposed to a key which can be rotated, and whether that is in itself secure. You think it's secure and you know that you can't lose that password, therefore you need to keep the password somewhere. But the issue is, where are you keeping the password? Is it miles away and not related, so that you can still get to it? Because it's not using any other key-based system to generate the encryption key.
I think that's valid, John. I think there's the thing, like I think it's LastPass and 1Password. When you register for it, the bit that's not stored is really weird. There's a thing in both of those that it will store a helper file within the system. So if you forgot the keys, once you're in, you can get at the keys. And you're like, well, surely that's a problem in itself, because if anyone got into my system, now they've got all the keys. So the first thing to do in any of those, if it does do this like helper key kit thing, yes, print it out on physical paper, put it in a filing cabinet, give it to your aunt, give it to your granny to store in their houses as well, and then delete the key out of the application, because it shouldn't be there. It really shouldn't be there. And coming back to what you said, Chris, is best practice for a company, say they have a corporate version of LastPass. Once a month, IT should be printing that lot out. Sounds weird. Print it out. I mean, print it, put it in a filing cabinet, and put it in a safe. Because in that scenario, exactly as you say, Chris, your password manager dies. What happens if any of these big companies get hacked and it's all offline? Millions of companies are a problem. Well, at least you can sit there on your laurels going, well, I can just go to the folder, pull the folder out and go, my AWS key is this. Yes, you're not going to have the autofill. You can type it. It's going to be long, but at least you're in. It's those best practices that you need to follow. And you're right. Someone goes and nicks that folder. What do you do? That's why you put it in a safe.
So, Gary, can I interrupt you there just a moment? I mean, this is great stuff. I think there's a lot of talking to be done about this. Technically, we're on technically we're well over the limit of what you're meant to be talking about next.
Heidi and Chris, great, superb stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, Heidi and Chris. Thank you very much for that. It's really good, and I hope you will come back and talk again about it.
Right, Claris Engage. You all know it's on. It started. I mentioned it earlier that they're doing their new methodology of instead of having one big event. We'll discuss what that means and what it has to us. So far, to my knowledge, there have been 3 presentations. There's been the kickoff event with Brad and Peter, which was fine. And then we've got the Server Linux by Wim, which I have to say I was quite pleased when I watched that, and privileged actually, because Wim did a reasonable amount of some of that presentation for us a few months ago. But he then elaborates in much more detail in that session. So definitely worth going onto Claris's YouTube site and watching that. So I'd urge you to watch that. And then recently there was the executive Q&A. So what I've prepared is just a brief summary of what happened. I would say a show of hands, but not many people got their cameras on. So have most of you watched this? Have you watched the content? I did, but I'm curious. Show of hands from Johan. Chris Moyer said yes. There we go. We got a few. About half. I think about half. Good. Excellent. Fine. So you've all seen this. I don't know if you watched all of them or not. So yes, there was a kickoff thing with Brad, which he spoke about what the platform was, where it was going, what Engage was going to do. And him and Peter did a bit of a tag team between the two of them. It came out of that whole presentation that they felt Engage was a really good idea. This is where they were going to do it. They liked the long protracted process. They felt they could get more content out. They could deliver that content better. And it was more engaging to people. I don't know. I jumped on the Discord channel and there was a lot of people going, and we want some more. That's the impression I got from it, is the fact that, yeah, well, that was great, did the opening scene, but now if all of you may have gone to Defcon, some of you would, some of you haven't. I know quite a lot of people who have. I like the fact it's fast paced, go into one session, next session, next session, next session, and then you discuss that. I felt the Discord channel this time was great while it was on, and then it filtered away, and then it's going to ramp back up again. Whereas last year they ran a 2-day event and run it all in one go. So this is the thing I was always concerned about when they announced this, was the timetable. So I don't personally feel that wedded to it. I don't think it's the best idea. I think it's best to get the community together, but we'll see. We'll see how it pans out. The other thing that was covered in that executive keynote was the sneak peek. So Robert went over some of the key things they were looking at and what they were discussing. So there's a bunch of bits and pieces that Robert goes over, some of the key things that he's talking about or what's coming in the new versions. If you hadn't seen it all, then I'd assume you'll have a look at it. Then it went up to brand awareness, which I thought was just a bit weird because they don't have much of a brand. I don't think Claris do, personally. I think they've got areas of concerns they need to learn in these areas. And then it was the partner community, which I can't comment. I'm not a partner. So it'd be interesting to find out after I've got over this where we sit with these and so forth. And then the rest of it just filtered through. So I'm happy to do conversations of each session, because what I've got is this session, the next one, and the next one. So obviously Wim's I'm not going to talk about, you just go watch it, but then I've got the Q&A, which will cover some of it. So I'm quite happy to just whiz through this and jump into the bar, or we can talk about these of what other people's things. I wanted this to be more of an open discussion about what people had seen with it. Obviously, if you've seen that, which half of us have, so I'd be interested to find out what other people's take is on that. Only for the reason for completeness to get on the recordings, because I think this should be discussed. I think I'm selfish and hoping that Claris secretly come and watch our event. And if they do, I think they should have the group of the people here's opinions on this and not have it in the virtual bar in some respects, but keep it clean. That's all I ask. So does anyone want to chip in and discuss what they thought of the executive keynote to start with?
Hey, I'll jump in. The mention of the smart pack files, that was one of the most interesting things that I heard. So my understanding of the smart pack files are, the latest version produced, and I don't know who produced it, so I hope I don't hurt anyone's feelings. I haven't even seen them, so they could be awesome.
Yeah.
One of the things that Andy Lecates did standing on the conference stage many years ago is he talked about something that FileMaker had published that had been done by someone else, but FileMaker published it. And Andy Lecates said on the stage to the whole room, 1,000 people, 1,300 people, hey, have at it, hack at it. And we at the New York FileMaker Pro User Group, we're developers. We like to look at code. We like to see how other people have done it, maybe learn something, maybe critique something. So I wonder how our friends at Claris are going to put that forward. Are they going to put it forward as, this is perfect, this is the way to do it, which should obviously have impacts to the community, or whether they're going to be like, hey, here's one way to do it. What do you all think? And kind of spark a debate. So that's my comment for anyone from Claris who's listening. Be interesting to see how that's approached.
Anyone else got any questions to that or follow up from that?
Well,
No?
on my end, just one comment. I was really happy with the the follow up to the kickoff with the Q&A with both Brad and Peter. I think the format was very interesting, way more casual and not perhaps as polished as other presentation, but it makes it authentic, and that's what really I liked about all this. We got some very nice updates, both in terms of things that were discussed in the past, and also for what is upcoming on the let's say next 12 months horizon. So I think there's been this crescendo of Claris coming forward, speaking more and speaking not just about features, but about vision, and I think that really is a good thing. I just want more of this and on a more frequent basis. But it's awesome. It's awesome, and not to take away from when we get to peek behind the curtains and see like an early preview of a given feature that is coming to the product. But the part where they're really exposing the general vision is I think it's great.
I agree with you. I think I'll get onto the Q&A, which is the next slide. So I'm not going to go over Wim's thing, but as I say, I mentioned it earlier, have a look at the Linux thing because it was very good. But I think you're absolutely right, Robert, is that I felt the Q&A session was better than the opening session. I think the opening session was a preamble to get you going with it. Whether that should have been a bit more under the hood stuff or a bit more to whet the appetite for everyone it was the kickoff of a new venture with Engage. So I just felt it could have been a bit stronger, and that's what I was trying to get to. But I totally agree. These were the questions that I documented while I was watching it. It was the key things that I took out of those. There was a few more bits than what they covered, but I really did like what they went over. So like the pro code thing, not sure where we sit with that. I don't know. It seems to be another term FileMaker's come up with. We had no code, low code. Now we've got pro code, and it's where FileMaker sit. I don't know. They spent a long time discussing that. The innovation graph I thought needed some explanation. If you don't remember what it was and you can't remember what it looked like, this is the innovation graph that Brad was talking about. So absolutely, that's what they're explaining. They went into a lot more detail in the Q&A about what this is and where it sits. More the fact that the reason why they're launching the Claris platform is to give it scope to go so much further than basically in their ideas where a FileMaker can sit. So they're changing the engine it's running on. They're changing how the interface is going to work. They're changing the UX with ESS Plus. They're changing all of that sort of stuff. They're going towards a bigger picture of, like saying, Connect bridges the gap a little bit and gives you a bit more functionality, but the platform is going to launch it and go much further away from what FileMaker can do. But the rest assured that FileMaker will be able to talk to that and use it. So I think, providing they deliver on their promise of that, I don't have a problem with this. If it gives more scope, then I think it's a good thing. I don't see it as a bad thing. So from my point of view, I think it'll be a sensible approach to why limit yourselves with the technology that is out the box at the moment, move with the times and move forward. So from that, someone asked the question, well, if that's the case, how much is your investment in FileMaker? It was like, well, okay, FileMaker's the core of the platform still and will always be around. And that was literally the one-line answer. So that's the rest assured. That's the reassurance you've got from Claris of it will be around. I think the way technology is going, I think the new software is the language it's built in is MongoDB as a back end. And that gives you a lot more scope to change what you're doing with the data. That's how ASS Plus is going to work. So the fact that you could have, and I like what Peter was saying about denormalized data. I use that in Click an awful lot. So we don't normalize data. So you denormalize it. It's just a row of records, and then you tell the application to go do something with those records. So they implied the new version will be HTML. So it'll be a HTML app process. They discussed briefly around that architecture of how you would wrap that up. There was discussion of possibly using Electron to wrap that up into an app. So there's a lot of scope, and I think they're dipping their toe in many ponds and seeing which one seems to be right. And I welcome that. I think this is forward thinking from Claris. Probably a bit overdue and long overdue, but I like where it's going. One thing that I skipped over is when will the new stuff be displayed? They did highlight in that session that there should be a snippet of information for that new build stuff in January, but mainly they're going to hold it out for Nashville next year, which will be a DevCon apparently, but no one knows when. So, and the other thing I like, coming back to what Robert was saying, was the release cycle. I think they're going to release stuff every month or so. It's literally going to be a fast release, but they said, don't expect it to be fully finished. It will have bugs. It will have issues. It will, if you're releasing that quick, if you're not putting it through 6 months, a year's worth of testing to confirm it's okay, then there's going to be issues. So that then falls on us, I feel, as a community to go, right, we need a test environment. Well, to be fair, FileMaker doesn't lend itself to a test environment that easily, but it's something we need to look at. And I think maybe with the new technologies, there may be more scope to have a test environment. It'll be easier to deploy a test scenario of what you're doing. Because if your data set is stored centrally and you don't have all the UI stuff, you should be able to hook anything on that and test the data through a module of way of testing what data you've got in there and change the structure. So it may lend itself to a better testing, in effect, a build, test and deploy environment. So I think that'll be fine. And I mentioned it before about growing the community. I think there is an area in here where Claris highlighted they've done some research on this, and they said they've run pilots and research screens, research objects to basically validate the approach that they're taking. And they've partnered up with, I can't remember what it is, and I think it's only in the US. So, US people here will be able to help me. It's something to do with Apple schools or something. So it's tied in with that, and they're saying that's going to give them a much broader base to then get FileMaker out there as an entity that people can use. As I said before, I think they've got a mountain to climb in that area. I think they're so far behind the rest of the technologies, but they're going to push it and see where they come. I hope they deliver on their promise, as I said before, is the fact that if they then turn up and say, right, instead of having 14 jobs in 6 months, we've got 50 jobs in 6 months in the UK. Well, it's progress. It's not as many as SQL or Postgres, but it's moving in the right direction. So, it was a quick whiz of what was covered, and I didn't want to spend too much. I wanted it more of a Q&A session, so I was quite happy to whiz through it. But it's more about your ideas. I want to discuss it if you've seen it. The one thing I mentioned, someone mentioned about Claris Connect and said, if Claris Connect is that middleware between FileMaker and then moving up to the platform, if it was the visionary thing to make it move forward, why was it so slow to get anything out of Claris Connect? So, which I find was quite a pertinent question, but I thought it was an important one. And their answer was they're going to be investing in Claris Connect over the next year.
To be fair, Gary, that was me.
Was it you? Well done, John. I thought it was a brilliant question. I didn't know it was you. And I agree with you. It's the fact that if this is the model for them moving and jumping forward, why why is it so slow? There's a handful of people using Claris Connect. There's a handful of new Claris Connect apps that have come out. And they did say they're going to look at doing a Claris Connect, like an SDK to help you build a Connect app quicker and easier, so you can build them yourself. Okay. So does that mean we've all got to understand Xcode? If any of you have built an iOS app, then it's not.
Well, I think the idea is that in doing that, if you had something that if you built a connector to Click,
yeah,
because you had the experience to do it, but could share it with everybody else, it means everybody else doesn't have to build a connector to Click because Gary's built one that works. And so we'll be looking to the kind of bigger developers, potentially in the States, who've got expertise to go, here's a connector I built for this, here's a connector I built for that. Because that crowdsourcing that is the best way to do it, rather than relying on FileMaker's resources.
I think it's a good idea if they could get there, but it's like, how long's Connect been around now? 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah, well, that was why I asked the question.
Yeah, very good question, John. I think that was a brilliant question.
On that, the linking thing, I think one of the things that they did say is that what they want to try and do is, if you're a Claris partner, so obviously if people download a demo or kind of get into FileMaker in some kind of way, that the sales team then reach out and talk to them. And the first thing they should be offering them is to link up with a local Claris partner to at least have a conversation and do a tiny bit of mentoring, rather than just expect people to be able to go from zero to working straight off. And the best way to do it is to work with Claris partners to be the first step in kind of your extended journey if you are new to it, knowing that there's somebody who can guide you through the resources or point you to the help or say, here's where to go and ask a question. I think that's part of what it's about. It has been trialed in the States, but it's not over here.
That's exactly the model that Click do. They just have a partner scheme to do that. So if you sign up to that software and download it, yes, a representative from the company will get in touch with you, but they will also, part of that sign up process is the demographics of where you are. And they would then go, right, there's 15 partners in your area, go talk to them. It's a tried and tested model. It does work. It works well. So I welcome that. I don't know how you guys, though your partners, welcome that. Have you got enough scope within your day to then deal with 50? I suppose you should do, because hopefully it could be 50 clients. So if they come to you, so there's potential gain there for everybody, I think.
I think we'd all like more than zero.
Touche. So yeah, I don't know. I personally would prefer a more consolidated approach to this, but I also understand that we're all busy. So us taking 3, 4, 5 solid days back to back out to do a Defcon as we normally would have done. I know I probably couldn't do that in the current scope of what's going on. We work for different companies and different things. Me being in-house, is we're still rescuing our company from a pandemic that hit it. So we work in retail, so retail's not fully back yet. It's getting there, but it's a challenge. So me having time to go and come over to the States is probably not in my remit. So I welcome anything online at the moment, but who's to say in 12 months' time where we'll be? But I think this is I don't know if this is something that they're going to run ongoing. They're certainly going to run it for the next 12 months and their remit of their roadmap. But it's whether or not that they go, well, they know Nashville is going to happen. They categorically said that's going to happen next year. They don't know when, but it's going to happen unless there's another pandemic or another release of COVID or whatever, but it's planning to run. So if it does run, is this a short-lived thing, or will this run in tandem with Defcon as well? Who knows? But, we'll see what happens. The next thing I know that's on there is I think it's Maca is doing a thing on the 14th about training. So I'm certainly interested to see what they're going to say about that. So.
Yeah, great, Gary. Thanks for that. Before we're going to try and switch to the iPad and in the virtual bar. There's a couple of things I wanted to say. Connect, yeah, absolutely, John and Gary. I thought the general approach this year was much more open than last year, because last year was basically just a marketing exercise, whereas this, that's what it felt like. And this one, it does sound like they're listening to us. So hopefully they're going to take the input from developers more seriously. John, you probably know a lot more about that. But yeah, I'm generally positive, I thought, this year.
Just to add to what Jules said, I think having the event live is really a good move. I mean, it's a different format if it's pre-recorded, but I think I was glad that they took it live, even if that meant that there could be like glitches with the sound and whatnot. But live makes it so much more feeling like you're part of what's happening.
I think the Q&A live is definitely the key thing. I think that Q&A session was, I agree, really good session. It's the fact that there were questions coming in. There was an opportunity to post those questions, and they did their best way to answer it. And I think they were very open and just said, if you ask us something that we can't answer, we're just going to say, do we move on? And I don't think we should be too gullible to, well, they didn't answer my question. Well, there's only so much they can talk publicly about, the stuff in the winds, the stuff they're working on. I think we've got to be realistic. What they're trying to do is they're trying to be more engaging, as the title says, with us. And I think that's a good thing. I really do think it's a good thing. So, and I like that approach. I think if they could do more of that, I think they get more feedback from us.
Yeah. I think they may have shot themselves in the foot a number of times recently by saying, hey, we're going to do a roadmap presentation, when in fact it's not really a roadmap. What this Q&A did was provide a roadmap. It didn't just, however, start from day zero. They're already quite a long way down the route, but they said, here is where we are going. That's a roadmap. We're going there. Not, we're about to release this, we're about to release this, and then you find this, and then you find this. That's not a roadmap. That's a work schedule. And I think people have been disappointed by roadmaps which haven't given them enough of the information they feel they want. Whereas this one, by nature, is very different, and therefore it left some people confused, because they then said, well, why haven't you told us when it's all happening? Well, the reason is they signaled a very big change, which isn't we're thinking about a big change, we might be going here. I think pretty much that's where they are going. They've already done lots of work for that. Yeah. So it was a very different type of pitch, particularly to developers, to kind of go, no, we're looking after the platform properly. We are going to grow it in a really interesting, exciting way. But FileMaker is still the jewel in the crown, and it's not going away either. It's just not getting the same level of investment, because the return from that investment we can't build in new Wizzo features quite as quickly to have as big an impact as doing this new thing, which will take everybody, hopefully following that curve, into a totally different space. So very different type of presentation.
I was impressed by Peter Nelson's engagement. I'm looking at his follow-up, not just during the talk, and the tag teaming that he and Brad did was impressive. After the talk, there was, I'd say, very impressive feedback, like 38 long messages where Peter was discussing technical aspects with the community. So that was impressive. And the technical, to me, the biggest technical piece that's being added is this MongoDB with its eventual consistency. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how that gets merged. You know, how they merge that code base with the existing FileMaker code base to make it a collection of technologies that play nice. So it will be exciting. It'll also be exciting to see, you know, I'm assuming we're about 2 years out from seeing it, and how they manage the legacy. Well, I shouldn't call it the legacy, the crown jewels, I think John just called it, how they manage that and nurture that, the existing market, while they're building the exciting new technology.
Yeah, I agree. I think that side of it, that technology is good. It's if you've got your data set, you can just plug it in anywhere and then use that data that's there. I think the scope for that is huge. You're not then tied to a single app that then can read it. And yes, we've got various tools to gain that data out and get the data from the set. But to me, it's just you could have a central core of data, and then you could get anything to pull from it. So that has security issues. That has a whole heap of other issues. But how they manage that, that's their problem, and they're going to have to address those. But I thought, let's say, Q&A, I thought was very good.
So first of all, I'd just really like to say thank you to all the speakers, to James for his excellent demo, Gary for all the bits he's done, and particularly to Chris and Heidi as well for some really, really useful stuff.
Yeah.
And thank you very much, everyone, and of course to all you for coming.